Coming to our Elevating Safety panel. I hope you were able to attend the keynote where I outlined some of our perspective and initiatives on safety. And really, the reason to think about and engage in safety is that safety is critical to everything you do in an enterprise application. And we're in a policy environment right now where decisions are being made about the future of the industry and where and when and how you can fly based on the perceived risks of drones in general, as well as, more specifically, the nature of your operation. And those policy outcomes, whether it's flight over people or remote ID or night operations or at some point beyond visual line of sight operations, they're all going to impact your enterprise business if you want to get the most out of drone technology. So really important to understand what the industry and the stakeholder community are doing on safety, and if possible, join us in our efforts so we aren't just doing that alone, as well as sharing information, sharing the results of your operation in a way that contributes to the story of safety in the industry. I mean, I got to say, I think it was Drone Deploy's slide yesterday with a million flights per year. I mean, that is an amazing safety story. He wasn't telling a safety story, but think about that, 1 million flights. We know those have all been without incident in terms of serious injuries or worse. And that's just one company's platform on one set of products out there. So if we have millions of flights per year, we've got the safest form of aviation the world's ever seen. But we're not really getting credit for that, right? There's still a lot of concern about safety risk. So I'm glad to say we have a panel of experts really can talk through some of the challenges and opportunities we have that are related to safety, as well as the policies that are driven by safety. Just to introduce them before they tell you a little bit about their own organization. So Greg Dietz is the founder and CEO of Technology Exploration Group, a solutions-oriented, award-winning software development company. He's also the president and chairman of the Silicon Valley chapter of the AVSI, and serves as the communications lead for the Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team, which is a collaborative effort between the FAA and industry to enhance the safety of UAS operations. John Hagranis is the CEO and founder of Kitty Hawk. They provide enlightened drone operations software to UAS operators and large commercial UAS teams spanning insurance, inspection, construction, energy, media, and entertainment industries. What do you think about Lego? John is a founding member of the FAA UAS safety team, so it's great to work with him and directly on safety efforts. Jeff Moore, thank you for joining us. Many of us, Shirley, including myself, came through Los Angeles International Airport. Jeff is the manager of airport operations and special advisor to the CEO and UAS for the Los Angeles World Airports. He has over 25 years of experience in airport operations. He's a certified member of the American Association of Airport Executives, and he holds a commercial pilot's license and certified flight instructor's rating. If our flight is delayed, should we blame you?
I'll find somebody to blame.
So no. And finally, but certainly not least, Christian Ramsey at UAvionics, where he's president. UAvionics develops certified and uncertified communications, navigation, and surveillance avionics for UAS and general aviation. Formerly, he was a deputy program manager for Harris Corporation on the FAA's ADS-B program, and program manager for UAS R&D programs. Thank you all for joining us and taking your time out of your busy schedules. What I'd like to do is just give you each a few minutes to explain how your organization is engaged in safety and policy issues. I know you've all brought a couple of slides to illustrate that. I'm going to turn it over to Greg first. There you go.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to introduce the Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team to you. We are just like the General Aviation Safety Team and the CAS, the Commercial Aircraft Safety Team, as well as the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. And what we are is we're an industry group of folks who are concerned about things that will damage the industry. We come together in collaborative ways, and we work on safety enhancements. And I'd encourage you all to join me at the unmannedaircraftsafetyteam.org site to learn more about that. But today I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about an initiative that the FAA is launching with the Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team. And it involves all of us. And all of us need to take this to heart because as industry professionals, if we let one of these mistakes of an amateur damage us, it can damage the industry. So we're trying to really reach out through this fundamental week of November 4th through the 10th. And you can see we're going to focus on drone and safety education. We're going to focus on the conversation of safety, and we're going to focus on safety enhancements. The Unmanned Aircraft Safety Team, as I'll tell you a little bit later, also makes recommendations on things like return to landing, safety enhancements for preparing for flights for people, and really understanding the impacts of these things. The last thing I'd like to, again, remind everyone is that if you participate with Drone Safety Week, this event will be something the FAA and others will promote your events. So I encourage you all to come out and turn it over to John. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone. Super cool to be here. So, first thing I want to talk about KDOC. We build airspace and management systems with one goal. We want to help you fly safely, compliantly. Ultimately, how can we enable more flight? And there's a couple of ways that we want to do that. First is, what can we do for the industry to really help propel us all forward? Recreational pilots are the largest segment out there. So this year we partnered with the FAA to rebuild and relaunch the new Before You Fly application. We'll share some more of the numbers later, but this is one way that we can really help make the airspace safe. The better that recreational pilots are more aware of the airspace. Certainly, LA is a good example. It's a busy airspace that we're in. If recreational pilots are flying smarter, flying safer, that's better for all of us who are flying our COAs, commercial operations. So this is one way that we're helping to move the industry forward with safety. Secondly, we're putting policy into our product. For over 2 years now, we've had remote ID technologies in KDOC, and in our new air control platform, that is front and center. We want to keep moving technology into the product, into production. We know from hearing from our customers, you want to use this technology. And ultimately, the airspace is coming together. Manned aviation, busy airports at LAX, helicopters, urban air mobility, drone delivery, commercial and recreational drone operations. These are all coming together. We want to help enable that.
Okay, thanks everybody. And this is really exciting for me to be here. I'm really excited to be able to come and actually talk to all you folks about some of our concerns from the airport. I feel like kind of an outsider, but really I'm not, even though I'm responsible for safety at LAX. I'm also a drone operator. I've got a drone myself. I love the technology. I'm really excited to see what's happening in the future as far as what drones are going to be used for. But then at the same time, like I said, I do have a responsibility at the airport to try to keep it safe. And one of the concerns from not only myself, but our whole executive staff is really the drones that have been popping up over the last several years around the airport. We use this drone report that you see on the slides here. It's kind of our dashboard to show where the drone reports are located at. Since 2016, when we started tracking the drone activity, we've had 204 reports from pilots inbound to LAX. You can see on the screen there, most of those reports are on the approach, very few on the departure. No real residential areas on the departure, so that makes some sense. But again, the 2004, a concerning number, although we suspect that not all of those were actual drones. That's how many reports we got. That's how many times pilots thought they saw drones on the way in. And some of them gave pretty detailed accounts of what they saw, even calling out it's a Phantom 4 or the drum type. So from that perspective, we know that they are operating around the airport, and we're trying to address that through different ways. There's two specific efforts that are ongoing right now that I'll talk a little bit more about later, I'm sure. One of them is the DAC, which is the Drone Advisory Committee. It's a federal advisory committee which really is trying to work on integrating drones into the national airspace system. And then we also have the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Blue Ribbon Task Force is a smaller group of mainly airports commissioned by Airports Council International North America to address the issue of drones in and around the airport and what can we do to mitigate them. So both of those LAX is heavily involved in. So I'll talk about them a little bit more later, but that's going past now from here, but that's the concerns that we wanted to express. Thanks.
Avionics is an avionics manufacturer, so we don't build drones, but we put components on drones. And so we focus mostly on systems in the CNS realm, communications, navigations, and surveillance. We focus on systems that can be certifiable, that can help you type certify your aircraft, help you make safety cases, help you make flying in controlled airspace and things along those lines. We decided to approach this not only from the drone angle, though. We have solutions in unmanned systems, general aviation. We've got solutions for airport surface vehicles so that everyone can communicate and see everyone. Just a quick slide show a couple of our solutions in the unmanned space. You don't have a sense of size here, but these radios and GPS solutions are about the size of maybe 2 postage stamps. They're very, very small, very, very lightweight solutions, and we focus on these 3 areas of communications, navigations, and separation. And just finally, we have solutions also in general aviation, and we've established a pretty strong brand there as well, providing solutions called Sky Beacon and Tail Beacon, and they are, these look like lights, but they're actually ADS-B out solutions, and we'll get into a little bit later about what ADS-B is. I know we'll dive into that in a little bit. And that's it for me. Sorry about that.
Great. Thank you all for that intro to everything you're doing on drone safety. I want to go back to Greg and just learn some more about the UAST, particularly what work product has it issued, what's nearing completion, what's on the horizon, more specifically.
Since we began in 2006, we have been trying to approach things from a data-driven philosophy, which basically means we examine incidences, and we try and figure out if we can come up with a recommendation that people would adopt. We call them safety enhancements. In the last several years, we've come out with 3 safety enhancements. The safety enhancements cover everything from RTL to flight over people, and really are pushing into a lot of the tasks that we're going to be working on coming up in the next few years, which is really taking these things forward into version 1.1, pushing into things like remote ID, and what we're also considering the most important thing, and that's airman decision-making and cooperation. And that includes things like ASRS for drones, and for a lot of intents and purposes, a lot more education. So, as you know, all pilots that are going to be, whether you're a novice or not, you are considered a 107 pilot now, and so our next initiative will be pushing that forward as well.
So I'm curious, just to kind of get to my follow-up to John, who's involved in the founding of the UAST. How many of you have looked at UAST work products and maybe thought about incorporating some of the guidance into the things that you do? Any show of hands out there? Okay, not I see at least one in the back. So here's my question. Not to be too provocative, but John, is the safety team fulfilling its mission as you envisioned it a couple years ago? Is there more that it can do? Should the team be trying to bring in the operating community, maybe with the safety data they have, or otherwise, to help further promote the really good work that's happening there?
Yeah, it's almost a trick question because I think when the USC got started, there was no objective. It was a good foundation of can FAA and industry work together? How do we collaborate? How do we create a trust environment where we can share learning, share data, and really focus on defining objectives? I think since then, Greg's leadership, new working groups that are coming about, there's momentum. I think the thing that we still struggle with, I think one of the things we hope to solve with Before You Fly is what is the best mechanism to get the message out? And I don't think a lot of people in Kodiak know that we're on the UAST, for example. It's under the covers, so I think the question is, should it be the focal point or should it be the mechanism to use other outlets to get the message out?
Makes sense. So Jeff, one of those safety enhancements that UAST is working on is geofencing. And it's interesting to see that a lot of different efforts kind of reach commonality. So the Blue Ribbon Task Force interim report says, and I'm quoting, risk-based solutions such as manufacturer-installed geofencing technology are essential advancements in mitigation and should become the industry standard rather than the exception. Can you explain to us why the task force report says that? Obviously, we've had geofencing for many years, but how can we encourage others? If it's that important, if it's an essential advancement, how can the community encourage others to do something on geofencing as well?
I think that the Blue Ribbon Task Force identified geofencing as a critical item. I mean, it's the type of thing that whether it's built into the drone or it's built on the airport to keep drones out of the airspace that they need to stay out of near the airport. If that can be done automatically through technology, that is kind of a no-brainer for us, and that's something that we would want to see in all drones. So yeah, I agree. We need to encourage other manufacturers. DJI has some very sophisticated geofencing that is very useful. Other manufacturers, we need to encourage through efforts like the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the Drone Advisory Committee to have that as a standard that's out there. I think that one other thing is that we know that there's been folks that can get around it through hacking or whatever, and they can avoid using the geofencing. But the biggest concern we have, the biggest population that we have that may be an issue for an airport is really the uninformed, and the education that they get through seeing this on their iPhone or their controlling device is basically tells them they're in the wrong spot, and hopefully most of them will apply.
So here's an issue we've wrestled with for years. We think it's essential, and it sounds like others feel that way too, but obviously for enterprise users, for fire departments, geofencing could get in the way, so we need solutions to what we call unlock the geofencing. So I just opened it to the whole panel of what more can we do, perhaps collectively together, to figure out, who gets to override the geofencing and what circumstances. We've done that most broadly in terms of our public safety and other government agency qualified entities program. If we were to expand that to commercial operators, we need to figure out, who should and shouldn't have that. And when it comes to, Jeff, as you put it, sort of the uninformed, obviously people attending Airworks are not uninformed. We're not worried about anyone here. But how do we strike that balance? What we put into place in terms of a trust system?
I think the biggest thing that we hear from our customers is, how do we create a reliable workflow that we know we can trust? And for people that have authorized to fly in LAX, for example, how do we help them get airspace authorization and drone authorization to synchronize this? And I think the more that we can develop tools that, even if it's more steps, if someone knows the steps that they need to go through, that is something that a reliable, compliant operator will gladly do. So let's put more steps in front of them. Let's just define those steps so that they know this is the process.
I think as a caveat to that is that's exactly right, is that we also need to take into consideration experience, complexity of missions, and judgment. I think if you fly in a critical infrastructure area like I did in the Navy or in these spots, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get down to it, and then you have to have proper use of data protection and kind of thing. Very important, but if you go out and
That's Bob Metter with one of his trains.
if you go out there and get one of these releases from a restriction and don't, as he said, exemplify proper procedures and demonstrate that, then I think it's a very dangerous, slippery slope. So raise the bar as high as possible and make sure everybody does a good job.
Well, we got to strike a balance, and honestly, we welcome input. We've upgraded the geofencing system. We try to make it more flexible, more responsive, but we do have to understand at what point we can facilitate operations while at the same time addressing the real concerns from the airports and others that drones could create a huge safety risk in various scenarios. Great. So as part of our safety initiative, as you heard me say earlier today, we announced the commitment to ADS-B receivers starting next year. As we said at the time, that's actually a pretty heavy lift. Our product development cycle is pretty long, so we've had to be aggressive at getting our engineering teams to think about how to do that. So we've set an actually pretty high goal, but we think it's important. And I just wanted to start with Christian, and if you could, maybe not everyone understands ADS-B, if you could tell us what that is, the history of it, how is it useful today in the existing aviation world, and then maybe we'll get into perspectives on how drones could interact with it.
Sure. Yeah. So ADS-B is sometimes referred to as the next-gen air traffic control core technology. And it's kind of a misnomer. Next gen, the technology itself is about 20 years old. It just takes that long to roll out a new technology into the world of traditional aviation. What it basically does is augments traditional radar, which has some inaccuracies and limitations. The ADS-B system on board an aircraft receives its own GPS location and turns that into a radio broadcast where it broadcasts at least once per second, here I am, and here's who I am, here's who I am. So it's remote ID for manned aircraft. In fact, before remote ID was called remote ID, often the discussion was we need something ADS-B-like for drones. And so remote ID was effectively modeled after ADS-B. In the US, there's a mandate in place, if some of you are pilots, you're very, very aware, as of January 1st, this coming January 1st, 2020, if you're going to fly in controlled airspace anywhere in the US, you have to have ADS-B on board or you're not allowed in. So, and there are a dozen other mandates around the world in place in rolling scenarios. So as a technology for drones, it's almost a gift. The aircraft are telling you where they are. You don't have to get some specific sensor that's going to detect where it is because they're telling you. So the AirSense expansion for DJI, I commend you, right? I mean, because it's a no-brainer. So it's not only probably the most trusted detect and avoid technology, it's likely the cheapest as well in terms of deciding what to incorporate and how to avoid. Now, not every aircraft is going to have ADS-B out. There are exceptions that are available, but for those that are, it's a fantastic technology to use in your drone applications.
Jeff, from the airport perspective, what do you think about ADS-B? How does that fit into operations?
Yeah, I think just like the geofencing, it's just another safety enhancement that we need. And as Christian said, most if not all aircraft in 2020 are going to have ADS-B out technology aboard, and for the most part they do now. Having something aboard the drone that can detect that through ADS-B in is a great advantage to be able to avoid the worst case scenario that we think about, which is aircraft versus drone near the airport.
Greg, although the UAST isn't working on an ADS-B specific safety enhancement, how does that type of technology fit into some of the safety principles about airspace awareness? Is there a philosophy that aligns with using technology like that?
I think so. Being data-driven means we need data. And I think as we've learned from NTSB reports that situational awareness as a pilot and you knowing what's in your AO is important, but when we're also looking at what causes these incidents and that kind of thing, I think all of this will add a tremendous amount of data value. I think that it will also change the conversation away from it's a drone to actually what it is, and let's identify the problem. Because I think that a lot of drones, we talked about this in some regards, that they're getting a bad rap. And I think that on the other side, ADS-B for you industrial flyers is going to make sure that you're aware of what's around you and that you can get out of its way. And I think putting the ADS-B in on your aircraft is a tremendous safety enhancement, so I applaud you for that.
Thank you. So when we announced it, we got questions about, are you equipped with ADS-B out? Are the drones going to transmit their location using that existing technology? And the answer is no. Christian, from your perspective and knowledge, is there a place for ADS-B out, the transmission side, on drones? And why or why not?
Well, there is, but not for your typical audience, right? So aircraft, there's a big concern and rightfully so, protective attitude by the FAA and other regulators around the world to protect ADS-B for what it was originally intended for, and that is separation of manned aircraft. Now, there are going to be some drones that operate above Class A airspace, in Class A airspace, in controlled airspace. They're going to be larger. They're going to operate maybe under Part 91, which has equipment rules associated with it. Those aircraft, there is a place for ADS-B out on those solutions. It's going to be a significant minority of drones that do so. So probably from this audience's perspective, if you don't know you need it, you probably don't need it, right? So you would know already if you needed to have it, right? Yeah.
So turning to remote ID, which you mentioned earlier, to get to the point where we have those rules for advanced operations, flight over people, night operations, and beyond, it's very clear that remote ID is needed as a solution for accountability before the security agencies are going to be comfortable allowing drones to do more things. So the timing of that rulemaking process is very important. We agree that that is a great solution for accountability, including even at the state policy level. If you can implement, let's say, a privacy law because you have accountability over the drone that's allegedly invading someone's privacy, you don't need to restrict the flight. You just need to hold the pilot accountable for whatever the misbehavior is that fits under existing law. So drone ID is a solution for a lot of things. Just want to talk about the timing for it and just put the question to John. Where is the FAA on remote ID?
I think there's two ways to think about timing on remote ID. One, regulatory, FAA, and just to step back, we've learned a lot from Lens. There are intricacies and nuances. This is a complicated thing that we're starting from scratch. This is brand new territory. We've never thought about flights at 100 feet before. That's never been a concern at LAX, I imagine. This is brand new stuff, so I think the delays that we've had with the remote ID rule is understandable. This is brand new stuff. The latest is December, so let's keep our fingers crossed. You had your call to action this morning to comment, and I think we want all have a rule that we can all get behind. And the other thing with remote ID is it is possible today. If you want to consume it, there's Aeroscope. If you want to share remote ID data, that is possible. We've done demonstrations with the Enter USS, with Uber and Wing and others to show we can collaborate, we can broadcast, and we can show that a network remote ID is possible. So if you want to share your data, it's possible.
Katie Hawk did a paper or survey on remote ID in the past few months. Were there any key learnings from that?
I think the number one learning was everyone wants this. And all of the different questions, they all kind of filter down to the vast majority of all of the people that participated in our survey was, this will help us fly more, this will help unlock advanced operations. We want to adopt this, and I think that's where we as an industry can adopt this. We can fit in rule and specifics as that comes to be in a regulatory framework, but we can start today with a lot of the things that we're doing with ASTM and some of those regulatory bodies where that rulemaking went to ballot. ASTM standards are very close to being solidified, and they cover both broadcast and remote network-based remote ID. So I think that's a big step forward, and demonstrations that have been done internationally the last couple of weeks incorporated the latest ASTM. So the industry is ready, the technology is there. I think the biggest thing we can do is keep showing that we're adopting.
And we need the rules to acquire it at some point, but that's still going to take a couple of years. So in the meantime, Jeff, the LA World Airports is on the Drone Advisory Committee, and it's working on trying to push forward with remote ID in a voluntary way. Can you speak to where that initiative is?
Yeah, from the airport's perspective and from the DAC, I think remote ID is probably the technology that's most important to them. One of the gaps that we have from the airport is we may be able to identify where the drone is, but trying to identify the operator and hold them accountable is we don't have anything to do that. So the Drone Advisory Council, I think, actually developed a subgroup who worked on this to basically come up with incentives for the industry, for the drone industry, to equip the drones with remote ID ahead of maybe the FAA rule, knowing it's going to take some time. Some of those incentives, I think there was FAA rebates, these are recommendations that were made. FAA rebates, maybe opening up airspace that was previously off limits, maybe national parks or parts of that. Things like having preference for getting approvals for waivers. Several recommendations were made by the DAC to basically to try to promote this early.
And Greg, I know you've got a background like I do in recreational model aircraft. Are there things about remote ID that everyone supports it? Certainly it's important. Are you worried about cost, invasion of privacy, outcomes for remote ID that might be a problem from your point of view as an operator?
Well, I reflect back 30 years ago when I started, I had a clothespin and I'd put it on the board, and that's how I knew which channel I was on. If you were on my channel, my aircraft would usually wipe out. That's how we dealt with remote ID back then. But there was accountability on the field. And you went out there and shared the airspace at the time, and you took your slot and you went and flew and crashed and had a good time. And I think on that basis, remote ID will bring that back. On the flip side, I am concerned about the evil neighbor who just waits until my drone takes off and whips out his phone and comes out and starts yelling at me because he's got an electronic device to remind him when I'm flying. I am concerned about, frankly, indirect grabbing of my data, for lack of better terms, for signal intelligence. And all that goes into what I'm doing and where I'm doing. As a hobbyist, this is what I do to relax. And if I feel more scrutiny and it's less fun and it costs more, yeah, these are factors. So from the hobby shop worlds that have existed, I think that we need to recognize that on one front, remote ID is a great enabler. If it brings people back to the hobby shop and gets them serious again about flying and protects the thing that we love the most, then I love it. So I hope it works.
So lots of reasons to carefully review and comment on the proposed rule in December. So switching back to the airport safety issue, Jeff, the Blue Ribbon Task Force is really the first effort we've seen anywhere, and we've really been almost begging for this, to really work systematically on this threat of drones at airports where there is actually a risk, including prevention and mitigation. Can you give us an overview of where the task force is, both in terms of the interim report from July, as well as what might be coming out shortly that could inform both us and the operators as to what we can do, or maybe from the airport or air traffic perspective, what they can do to mitigate drone threats at airports?
Sure. Some real progress lately. So we did, the Blue Ribbon Task Force met in June of this year, and then again, and that was in DC, and then again just recently in Los Angeles. After the June meeting, the interim report came out, and then they've been working on the final report ever since. The final report is due out October 2nd, so that will be public at that time. It's going to have a lot of recommendations. Remember, these are airports, specifically airports that are making recommendations on how to deal with the drone hazard or threat near airports. So a couple of the items that will be in the recommendations, there's quite a few of them, but a few of them have to do based around counter UAS and who has the authority to use interdiction methods. It also has some comments on the TSA's tactical response plan. They've developed a plan for how to respond to drones, and it is still in draft form, but that's something that will also be commented on in the final report. There's also a template that's going to be included that will provide airports with a worksheet or playbook for how they can develop their own response plans. So that's a big item as well, giving some guidance on that. There's quite a few things, but those are probably the primary ones within the final report.
Great. Report a lot of things that align really perfectly with our elevating safety 10 principles. One of which was enforcement. The need for, on those, I think, rare instances when someone is doing something dangerous or putting people at risk, that the rules are enforced. Do you see it? Has there been a discussion in the task force about how to do that? Who has the resources to enforce when there is that dangerous misconduct?
There's been a lot of discussion about enforcement, and unfortunately, I think that's one area where I think there's still a lot of uncertainty as far as the authority that local law enforcement has. I think that they've been asking for guidance in that area, but it's still really unclear on when an operator is spotted, found in operating in an unauthorized area. What will they be cited for? Can they confiscate the drone? Would they be Can they be arrested? All of these things are really unclear on what their authority is. May not be the same in all parts of the country, but I know in the local area around Los Angeles, there's definitely that. So there may be, I believe there are some recommendations in the report, but I don't know that there was a lot of information for us to draw on to, which way that's going to go.
So related to enforcement, of course, is to prevent the harm, to mitigate it, which raises the issue of counter-UAS, which is sort of a hot topic lately, including at last year's Airworks conference. What do you think in terms of, when I think about the past year, we had the drama of the Gatwick incident. And no matter what you think happened there, that's certainly the scenario that people are worried about. And it comes up all the time now in my I can't do a government meeting anymore without Gatwick coming up. I was recently in the UK testifying in front of the UK Parliament on safety issues, including things we've done and things we can do together. So that is now top of mind in terms of the drone risk, and it is sort of thrown the UK into almost chaos in terms of drone regulation policy because they're worried about that. What can we do in terms of policy authority to enact counter-UAS mechanisms so that on the edge case when it's a real threat, someone, and who should that person be, someone can take action and actually keep people safe?
Yeah, I think the Gatwick incident is really what drew a lot of attention from the airports, and that I believe might have been the reason for the Blue Ribbon Task Force in the first place. But the counter-UAS has been a topic of discussion for quite a while. The recommendations in the report are that the local law enforcement, if they're trained and there's procedures in place, that they would have some authority to do some type of interdiction. Right now, the only agencies that are allowed to do true interdiction are Department of Homeland Security, so basically the TSA, the DOD, also the DOJ, and then I think the DOE is the fourth one. Our concern is the timing that would take. So if we have a Gatwick type of an incident which closed an airport for excess of 30 hours, you can't close LAX. They couldn't close it there. It costs them a lot of money. We obviously don't want to do that as well. But there is a scenario where that could happen. And to go through the approval process and to deploy whatever type of mitigation equipment is out there, we don't know where it's at or where it's going to be coming from or which one of those agencies would be bringing it. But it's obviously going to take quite a bit of time. So that we feel, airports feel, that the local law enforcement are probably in the best position to act quickly and to be able to mitigate if there's a clear and obvious threat from a drone. But at the same time, we recognize that it's got to be, that really should be the last resort. And that's exhausting all the resources that we have before that happens would have to take place. We still feel that local law enforcement would get this done a lot quicker than waiting for a federal agency.
So solutions come from having good data, good knowledge of what's actually happening. And as we pointed out in our elevating safety report, the sightings and even the collisions are not reliable, they're not informative. So just to ask you, Greg, what is the UAST doing in terms of trying to bring more utility to those reports?
Yeah, the fundamentals are that we found that the reported sightings were not actually accurate. Drone strikes didn't actually occur on planes, and as a result, there's a bit of hysteria around it. And what we've determined is that we're going to improve anonymous reporting for pilots. We're going to improve, the idea that if as an unmanned pilot, that you would be indemnified and held without liability for reporting. Because the truth is, we don't know the truth. And we need to spend a little more time and take a more data-driven approach and make sure that what we're actually creating here is not hysteria, but it's data-driven fact. And everything that we do as pilots, whether you're a general aviation pilot or flying an autonomous vehicle, is data. So I would caution all of you to not get caught up in the hype, to definitely verify and be part of the solution and tell us about it, because ultimately you are our eyes and ears. You're part of the team whether you know or not. We need you. So let's actually figure this out.
So the standardized form that's going to come out from UAST that helps pilots and airports report in an informative way, is there a time frame for that?
We're actually getting closer. There are some legal framework issues that the ASRS has afforded general aviation pilots that we need to extend to unmanned aviation pilots. pilots, as I just said. So I think by the end of the year, we should have guidance on that. The rest of these things, as John said, we're sitting on a lot of these diamonds ready to push them out. And we think that once we polish them up in 2020, that it will really help move the ball forward.
So John, you have a sophisticated network of drone operators. What do you think their views are on counter-UAS? Are they worried that their drones are going to be taken down?
I would start by broadening the definition of counter-UAS, and I would define counter-UAS as anything that disrupts a legitimate operation. And that could be shooting it down, that could be local law enforcement coming to talk to a pilot who has a registered aircraft and is authorized to fly and is completely within the bounds of his authorization, getting any questions, having to ground his aircraft to answer questions. So I think the way our customers that span different industries think about counter-UAS is what can we do to not be interfered with, and you're grounding the aircraft whether you're shooting it down or talking to someone. So the thing that we hear over again is if you're one of the good guys, you're doing things the right way, you want to raise your hand. This is where remote ID comes into play again, is you want to be seen. You want to raise your hand and say, this is where I'm operating, this is who I am, this is the rule set that we are operating under, and other operational details. If we can do that, that solves the counter-UAS problem.
So as we wrote about in our Elevating Safety paper, one of the ways to enhance safety is to make sure there's a clear understanding of where you shouldn't fly because it's sensitive, it's maybe critical infrastructure or some other issue. And airports are kind of an obvious and well understood case, but FAA has had since 2016 a congressional mandate, what we call Section 2209, to develop a mechanism for designation of facilities where drones generally should not be permitted. They're obviously way behind on that. They just announced a further delay in their rulemaking to late next year in terms of a proposal. John, is it possible that before you fly or other informational tools could inform people before the FAA finishes its work as to places that have a higher sensitivity? We've seen that in the so-called Section 99.7 sites, the national security sites. Those are already being added. But what more can we do, again, to try to get ahead of the issue and not wait for the regulations to catch up? Try to make a difference, maybe using an informational tool.
Yeah, I think that is our vision for before you fly and collecting this data. I think the fundamental thing that we want to help put into one place is right now there are rules around landing and takeoff and operations, and there's rules about airspace. And the more that we have an FAA data set that can set rules for where you should operate, that solves that problem. That's the biggest question we get is, this airspace looks good, but I'm told I can't take off. We need to bring that together. That's where data in these sites should really have one voice. And so the more that we can put data like that into a digital machine-readable format that we can populate into DJI applications, into before you fly, that's the missing piece.
Is this something the UST might look at? Right. Or help with?
I think that absolutely. I think that we're data-driven. So I like all the things that are being said today. A lot of what we've been trying to figure out is basically trying to pull some facts together, anonymous reports, hearsay, pulling things off the internet, and I think that's a mistake. So we need to really drill down, and I think it would make a great point there.
So one of the key developments this year, again, since the last Airworks, is that we have the proposals for flight over people and night operations. Those were out in the spring. Hopefully you all commented on them, what you liked, what you didn't like, and how we wait for various things to be completed. But what, Christian, can you tell us, what is the FAA proposing when it comes to flight over people, generally speaking?
Flights over people is a complicated issue. What the FAA has proposed in their NPRM is 3 separate categories. Category 1 is the lowest risk, and that's if your drone is less than 0.55 pounds. There's really nothing special you have to do. The FAA sort of designated that is a size that poses minimal risk. Go for it. Category 2, instead of imposing a weight limit, they've moved to kinetic energy. So what is the impact of the drone if it were to hit someone? And different things fall into play when you're talking about kinetic energy. It's not only the weight of the drone, but it is the speed. And so what they've proposed for Category 2 is an aircraft that would have a kinetic energy of less than 11 foot-pounds, or I think that's right. And so if that you are falling into that category, they impose some requirements on the manufacturer of the drone to reduce the weight or reduce that kinetic energy upon impact. That might be a parachute, that might be dissipation or crumpled impact. In any way, they don't prescribe how, but that's what they say you need to do. Third category is the highest risk. They raise that number from 11 foot-pounds to 25 foot-pounds. And in that category, you not only have manufacturer requirements, but you have operator and operations requirements as well to ensure that you minimize risk to the ground.
So is that a reasonable proposal? Are we going to actually achieve flight over people under that proposed set of rules? Christian, what do you think? And if anyone else has a view?
There's a lot of debate out there over whether 11 foot-pounds or 25 foot-pounds is the right number. Did they use the right math? Did they use the right reference and studies? Because there's not a lot out there that the FAA pulled from. What I do like is the framework of increasing risk and increasing mechanisms, providing for some requirements to be placed on the manufacturer and some requirements to be placed on the drone operator. I do like that framework, and so I think that in general, I think everyone has agreed with that. It's more about the disagreements on the specific numbers and the specific math that was used, where to draw that line.
We certainly have a number of parachute companies sponsoring Airworks, and present here, you can ask them. They're already achieving waivers, selling them to agencies that have COAs. We're already starting to see effectively flight over people on a waiver basis. So that's a good start. Obviously, we're all eager to see a rule-based approach so it can scale. And hopefully, we'll move forward on that. So with that and night operations and remote ID coming at the same time for security reasons, what's next? What do any of you think we're going to see in terms of rulemaking when it comes to particularly safety, but really anything? In terms of FAA policies that either restrict or expand what you can do with a drone.
Personally, I'd like to see some checkout flights. I'd like to see the hobby stores become a point of making sure you know what you know. And that includes taking a basic on-the-spot kind of checklist test to flights. I think that's important.
So does that mean even if you're just a kid experimenting with a toy, you can imagine a lot of cost and complexity trying to get that done?
The reality is when I was a young man, that's how I learned. And I think it's important that we develop a cadre of knowledge and pass that down, and we develop those skill sets now so that the young pilots that are coming up really raise their game instead of cause damage to it. And the more we rely on autonomy, the more we rely on technology, the less we develop our flight skills. And that's a concern.
Yeah, so look, there's certainly an ongoing discussion all the way back to Part 107 about flight proficiency testing, and obviously you will achieve a higher level of safety, but at an expense, right? There's a cost, there's...
Well, let me just say this. You don't have to go to the hobby store if DJI has a way to monitor how good a pilot you are and can give you some experiential testing, and that's what I'm looking at.
As you heard Mauro say, we are not monitoring your flight. So we'll have to talk about that idea. Although, look, there are technology-based solutions, and maybe John has a perspective on number one, should the industry, and this is almost a global question because there are policy frameworks worldwide, should we go to the route more like traditional aviation where you need to get a check ride, checked out, and you actually know how to fly the drone, or the risk is so low, is the technology so easy to use, obstacle avoidance technology, height limitations, you're sort of already in an operating envelope that is so safe that all you need is the knowledge of the rules, which can be tested more easily before going out and flying.
Yeah, I think, and maybe the way I'd frame that is, we're trying to propose that we treat drone flights and general aviation in the same mindset, where the way we treat end numbers, the way we treat physical aircraft in the national airspace, it shouldn't matter if you're flying with your thumbs, if you're pushing a button to take off, or if you're in that cockpit the same rules, the same sense of responsibility should be thought of in one singular fashion, and we should stop creating these buckets of a drone flight, a hobbyist flight, an aviation. That creates confusion. This is an aircraft. What we have outside this room are aircraft. Let's treat them the same.
So this is a question about, are we expanding and becoming more permissive with our policy, especially with respect to safety, or are we tightening, narrowing those frameworks? And I think one place where certainly in the past year there's been a change is the recreational side. Under the new legislation in Congress, you will need to take a knowledge test. You will need to do other things, including controlled airspace approvals. So that change for recreational community, not to just provide notification, but to actually obtain authorizations, has led to a Lance solution for recreational. I know, John, your company is one providing those authorizations. Can you speak to what we're seeing in terms of the response by the recreational community? Are they complying? Are they engaged? What's your perspective on that move to a higher standard or higher burden of getting authorization before flight?
I think the response has been amazing. It was so cool to see when the rules announced, people were following it. The day that the FAA was going to turn it on, people were, going crazy on forums and sending us support requests like, hey, why isn't this live? It's like, the FAA is going to turn it on at 12 o'clock Eastern. Like, relax. People were waiting that day to have it. And I think there were a lot of companies in this room. DJI helped to get the awareness out. Recreational operators, they want to comply. They want to use Lance. Lance is a cool system to be able to go on your phone, say where you're going to fly, get authorization in seconds. It's a beautiful thing. And so we put out a blog post with more numbers, but today we processed over 6,000 recreational Lance requests, and it's still fairly limited as far as its automatic approval to predefined ceilings, but the adoption of it is strong, and people want to say, why can't more airports support it? And they just want to see more of it. I think it's cool to see how quickly people want to use Lance.
And so education was actually noted in the Blue Ribbon Task Force report as a key to addressing the safety risks. And I think that's where the Before You Fly app update comes into play, particularly among recreational users. So that's the picture of Lance. What about Before You Fly? Is that, are people using it? Do you have some sense of like how many airspace checks are happening out there? Are people really using the tools that your company in particular has developed that would actually educate and inform people when they fly?
Yeah, we're super excited. So we processed over 700,000 airspace checks to date. This was launched at the end of July. We've answered that question, will people use this tool if they can get a simple interface and a reliable answer as to, hey, can I fly here? So the adoption and the usage of it has been great. The app reviews have gone from 1 stars to 4 stars, and just having people regularly use the application is super cool. And I think this is now just a stepping stone. This isn't job is complete. I think it's how do we collaborate with Drone Safety Week, with the UST, with DJI and people on this panel to really have this be the ultimate call to action for Before You Fly.
So just before I ask my last question to Greg, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So if we get the microphones ready for that, I'll just, we have about 5 or 6 minutes for that. But my last question to you, Greg, and it goes back to our little back and forth there, is the recreation.
So there's a bit of this sharing economy, which we have in the world now, which is going to benefit it. The other side is, hey, you just did a double backflip with your drone. I want to know how to do that. And that will drive innovation, that will drive excellence, and that will drive this practice.
Great. We'd love to get your questions. We have about 5 minutes left, so hopefully we'll get a few in. And I think the microphone is there in the middle. Don't be shy.
You need a leader.
You're welcome to speak to us later, of course.
Where's your mic?
Oh, right there.
So we have such an esteemed panel. Hello, Greg.
Let us know who you are so we can put your question in context.
So firefighter paramedic Dave Danielson. I'm one of the co-leads for LA Fire Department's drone program. And I've seen several familiar faces. It's great to see you and that you're down here in LA because If you didn't participate, we had a public safety event at our drill tower to venue everything that we've been doing. Our greatest challenge right now, obviously, is how we play well with others. And like Greg just said, talking about sharing knowledge and all that. So my question for you, going back to Lance, my biggest pitfall right now is coordinating with ATC. For those areas that I have to get further coordination on, is getting through that, process can be problematic in a public safety sense, right? So we're in discussions right now as far as how we do that. So I would like to direct that over to Jeff as far as discussions or where we can start that on building a better relationship with our local towers on the public safety spectrum, and is that a possibility sooner rather than later?
So I think you pretty much hit on it. It is building that relationship with, and he's the one that usually gives that authorization if it requires additional authorization from the tower. So I know that even though now we're using Lance, those calls still come into him. He can provide guidance, and I think that has worked out through the relationship that's been built through that. The actual process and some of the challenges that you maybe expressed, I'm not as familiar with with what that is or how bad that is. But I know that talking to the tower folks, they're very excited about allowing emergency response, public agencies being able to use drones in the authorized areas near the airport, or even in the unauthorized areas, as long as they can accommodate them. And it's through that communication back and forth through the tower.
The two things that stand for the coordination. One, there should be an option. In Kodiak, you can do this. You can put in the reason and justification, and it's basically an open field. So you can say, hey, I'm David, I want to fly here. Jeff said it was okay. And then you can provide that sort of safety justification that they should be reading. I think the other thing that airports can do is, I think, remove a little bit of that black box of like, are they looking at this? Are they seeing this? Has it been read? And I think that's functionality that we would like to build into Lands, but I think also work more with airports so that there's not as much variation between, hey, this airport approved me in 1 day, this one hasn't gotten back to me in 2 weeks. It's there's a lot of uncertainty.
Let me just add, thank you for your engagement on drones in general. It's just been so impressive, your pioneering work. We really appreciate it. And what a great example of policy getting in the way of beneficial operations, right? We need these outcomes to be good. One of the things we've raised with the FAA is, how are you defining these automatic altitude ceilings? Is there a standard? Is there a rule? Because they seem arbitrary across the country. Of course, you're dealing with a local issue, but you look across similar airports in different places, and they're wildly different. In some places, you really get zeros everywhere. So we're trying to push for the policy to be more accommodating so that the technology and the process that follows the policy can work better for you. So that was a great question. We've got just a few more seconds. If there's one more question, happy to take it. Any hands? Okay, great. We answered all of your questions. Terrific. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. It was a great discussion. Really appreciate it. Please remind us, Greg, about drone safety.
Guys, I wouldn't be here if I didn't do my job, and I just want to remind you, the FAA is calling upon all of you to come help me and the UAST. If you can come up with an event on November 4th through the 10th, we will promote it. And they are all in the playbook. If you go to unmannedaircraftsafetyteam.org, you will figure all this stuff out, and please join us and make this all safer.